So welcome to the District Elections Ad Hoc Committee. It is 4:06 and we will begin this meeting. In terms of attendance, we have Al Clark and myself as council members, and city staff. We have Dave, Olivia, and Brian, and our consultant, we have Sophia with us. So let's move to item number 2, which is public comment.
So Councilmember Alarcon, we did receive a few public comments for today's or this evening's District Elections Committee meeting from Russell Ruiz as well as Donna Downs. And so those have been forwarded to the committee members and staff.
I didn't see the Donna Downs one.
That one, yeah, it was a part of the 4 or 5 messages that I sent in one email this afternoon.
Okay. I saw,
It's the second one in the PDF package.
oh,
Her comment or her email referenced the number of registered voters in Carpinteria.
There's no meeting.
Do you need Brian to resend it, Al? Would that be helpful?
no, I just read it.
Oh,
I got
okay.
it. I got it.
Okay. So next item on our agenda is to approve the meeting minutes from our September 8th meeting.
Move to approve.
Okay, I will second. So let's move on to the next item, which is item
Councilmember Alarcon,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry. The vote,
Oh, yes.
just a voice vote's fine.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I don't know how you'd like to do it, Councilmember Alarcon. We can, I see there's one attendee member of the public there. We could take public comment on general matters under the District Election Committee purview. We often take, when we get to the agenda items, we take comment on each agenda item also. But if there's general comments on the subject matter of the committee, you could take those under the item number 3, the public comment period also.
Okay, perfect. So if there's any public comment for agenda item number 3, please raise your hand.
And so I do not see any raised hands at this time.
Okay. So item number 4, which is to debrief about the September workshops.
Yeah, so we had our 3 workshops and they were held on various days at different times. We had a Monday night at 5:30, we had a Wednesday at noon, and we had a Sunday at 2 p.m. And we actually had almost about the same number of people at all of them and in different modalities. So the first one, we had 6 people online, and then 1 person arrived right as we were closing down. So 7 total attendees. And then for the second one, for the noontime, we had 4 people online and 2 people in person. And then for the Sunday one, which was the one I was most curious about in terms of turnout, we actually had 2 people online and 5 people in person. So it's always interesting to kind of try out different times and just see when the community can make it out. And I think it was very, really, it made a lot of sense to have them at different times to just kind of learn what works for members of our community. And so total, we had 20 participants, which is not a huge number, but it's also was kind of the first set of workshops. And we expect that as we do more and engage more of the public, that more people will participate. And a big part of it has to do with getting people to register on the website so that they can get notifications about anything that's coming up. It has to do with word of mouth saying, hey, I was there, this was really interesting, or have you heard about this, or what and just kind of getting a conversation started. As we ran ads in the newspaper and on social media, and those were I think well received and cited as well. So
Is-
we are continuously,
Quick question.
Sure.
Is that what the participants had mentioned that they learned about it was through social media and the newspaper or?
so they didn't necessarily say that they saw it, but there were comments made about social media about that we're using it well and that they did see it in different platforms. And yeah, so I think that went well. We're continuously making edits to our website and adding additional relevant background documents and videos. We flagged for the consultants instances in which the word redistricting needs to be replaced by just districting, so that it's not confusing. And during the public workshops, there was one map that was submitted with districts instead of communities of interest, which was the focus for this past workshops. And this physical map and all of the physical maps that we receive will be forwarded to the consultants, and they will be digitizing them and including census data in them. And then these maps will be included in the submissions to City Council for consideration of the adopted maps. And then the consultants have stated at previous meetings that maps that have been submitted cannot be deleted off of District R. I know that was a question that had come up a couple of times. And so I just wanted to bring those issues up as they were raised throughout either public comment or at the workshops. Yeah, can I answer any other questions about the workshops themselves? Well, they were recorded by TVSB, and they will be, they were Zoom, they were hybrid, and so all three of them will be available on the website.
Do you have any additional questions, Al, or do you have any questions?
No,
Yeah, no questions on my end. And if there, we can move to public comment if there's any questions from the public. Oh, Brian.
Sorry, so far, no raised hands.
Okay, then we can move on to agenda item number 5, future plans.
Future plans, I'll pick this one up with Olivia and Sophia's help, jumping in where needed. So from this point forward, after our 3 workshops, there's 5 additional meetings to review maps and talk about the mapping process and get maps submitted. In talking to our consultant team about this a little bit, the way that it was initially set out in the schedule, a little bit unclear for the first 2 meetings that were referred to as meetings and then described as hearings. And then the 3 following were clearly hearings before the council. We've gotten clarification that you know, of the 5 remaining meetings, 4 of those need to be in front of the city council at noticed hearings. One of those, your council, the city apparently has some discretion over whether or not that occurs at the council or if it occurs separately, which could be at this committee level, which is what was described on the agenda. So we're going to be making some adjustments to that agenda, but wanted to ask you today what your druthers are. We'll talk about that a little bit also under the next agenda item in terms of scheduling next meeting and the committee's work from here going forward. As you may recall, the committee was set up to establish the process and really kind of launch this forward to the council. And you've done a good job of that. And I think we're getting real close to doing that. We would like at least one more meeting of your committee to discuss and go over the adjustments to the website and the project schedule. That could be the meeting also where we conduct the next meeting. We would notice it as such, and that would be where we start talking about and getting ideas on district mapping. And then the following 4 meetings will make schedule adjustments and description adjustments to make clear that all 4 of those will be the city council. So that's kind of what's going on. Also want to note that we are going to be doing a mailing to every household. So the physical placemat style map that we talked about before will be mailed with some instructions and background to every household in the city. So people have the option. And of course, some of those instructions, a part of those instructions will include how to get to the website if people prefer to do the mapping on the website, but they'll have an opportunity to mark up maps with their district ideas and to submit them physically also. So I think the committee previously thought that was important to provide that option. And so just want to note that mailing will be going out soon, within the next couple of weeks. And just to make clear, the adjusted schedule. So right now, the schedule was for September and October for the next 2 meetings, and we're moving that to October, November. And then would love your feedback for that October meeting, if you'd like to have that here, or if you'd like us to handle it, here being the district level, or if you'd like us to handle that the way we're going to be handling the final 4 meetings at a regularly scheduled city council meeting.
So I'm sorry. So Dave, are you asking us in terms of scheduling one more meeting in October? And then at that point, we'll do the other 4 in front of the city council?
That's right. And let me, just to make this a little bit easier, let me try to screen share here and find that schedule. So here's what's up on the website now. We had the 3 workshops, of course. And then you can see these next 2 meetings prior to the 3 that are referred to as hearings for the council are described as meetings, but then it indicates these are pre-map hearing. And again, maybe Sophia can chime in, but talking to our consultant, my understanding is that we have some discretion over at least one of these meetings. They could occur here at the subcommittee or at a separate public meeting, doesn't need to be before the council. But the other 4, so including the second meeting, would need to be at the city council. And so the input I'm looking for, and these will move, this instead of September, obviously we're running out of this month. This will be an October meeting, and then this will be November, the second meeting. So we'll change the schedule to reflect that and advertise accordingly. And for this first meeting, we're looking for your input. Would you like to have that at the subcommittee level or independently, or would you recommend that we go ahead and schedule that like the others at the city council?
I like the idea of having it at the subcommittee level. How about you, Al? What are your
Yes,
thoughts?
yes.
Okay. And how Dave described it, Sophia, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. For a conversion, you must have a total of 5 hearings, and 2 of those, when it means pre-map hearing, it's just a discussion to give a general presentation so the public is aware of the process and how they can submit testimony. And it's also the opportunity to listen specifically to community of interest testimony. There will be no maps discussed. We won't be drafting maps. We'll just be listening. And then for the map hearings, the 3rd and 4th one, then there will be draft maps up for discussion that the public will be able to see prior. But that's what we mean by pre-mapping, is it's just a space to listen to the public and hear testimony, but we will not be allowed to draw maps yet.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks for that clarification, Sophia.
Any other questions? Do you have any questions, Al?
No, I guess the only one is, do we know when the 2020 census data is gonna come on?
Maybe Sophia can answer that. I know they have the data and they're working on it now.
For Districtor, yes, we anticipate to have that up by late this week or early next week, we got the final data set from the statewide database, and now we're waiting on Districtor to update your homepage. Because the data
you.
kind of came in 3 different waves. Again, because we got it late, normally we would have received it in March, but we received a legacy file format in late August. And then we got the the legacy file was the final data set from the census. It just needed some kind of working that we did on our end at Redistricting Partners. But the final data set that your city will be using is a statewide prison reapportionment data that we got from the statewide database. And they just released that, I believe it was like last week. So now Districtor is moving to convert that and add that to your homepage. So it's coming in a couple of waves. So thank you for your patience, and we're trying to get that up very soon.
All right. No, thank you. It's very interesting.
Of course. Yeah, great questions.
Sophia, in terms of the census and the census blocks, I know you weren't at the last meeting, but Chris had mentioned he would be sending over a memo that talked about the map drawing and the census blocks.
Oh, yeah, he updated me on that a little bit earlier today and said, again, we're not a law firm, so I can't give an opinion out of our own firm, but that he's working to draft something from a firm or lawyer to send. But it is our general practice to not split census blocks, and that is due to the first criteria of utilizing equal population as the number 1 criteria that is utilized across the board for district conversions, so districting and redistricting. And that's based on census population data, and the smallest unit of geography that we get from the census is at the block level. And so to split a block, then we wouldn't be utilizing census data. It would, we don't know then the true data that would be in a split block. So that is just our general best practice, but he did update me that we will work to get you something from a firm. But for our practice across the board, across the agencies, we advise generally not to do that.
And help me understand this in context, Sophia. So what you're describing seems to me to be obviously important information when the council is deliberating on map submittals. They'll be looking at that, and they'll be given that recommendation from your firm with their expertise, and legal counsel can of course provide some guidance to the council as they look at that. But for the public that is drafting maps, they may not, especially if they're on working on a placemat style map and they're drawing it, they could very easily, of course, either by preference or because it's a paper map, not follow census block groups. And so I'm assuming when that's digitized, or well, let me ask the question, I guess. When it's digitized, will it reflect as best as possible where they've actually drawn the line independent in a form that, unlike District R, allows that to be shown independent of the block group, and then the council, in looking at the map, can just be advised from consultant, staff, whatever, that just note that this particular map you're looking at in this 1 or 2 places splits a block group, and we don't recommend that. Here's what it is if you make adjustments to the line to not split the block group, and what happens to this and that. Is that kind of the way that this is going to play out?
So I'll just say to you, for when anyone is drawing a map in Districtor, you are not allowed to split blocks. You can only select blocks when you're using the tool to draw a district plan. So I did look at the Districtor page for Carpinteria and saw that Mr. Ruiz and I think a couple of other members of the public drew full draft plans using the community of interest tool. So they may potentially be, or even in that you're not able to split blocks. So that's a starting point when we're using Districtor. In terms of paper maps, I can check with Paul and Chris on this, but it again is generally our best practice not to split blocks. And that also has to do with the software that we use. If we split a block and our software could potentially mess up the data set, but I will get back to you on that, on what our practice will be as a firm. But generally we could note that that it is in our the kind of industry standard to utilize that map in full because it does split a block. Another thing I want to discuss is that when we see maps from the public, generally we would modify them to adhere to city charter, state law, and federal law. So we could keep the integrity of the public submitted plan, but then make the modifications so that the city would be allowed to then utilize it and potentially uplift it to look at it as a draft map or a final map. So that is something that we do across the board with other clients. Is we'll see wonderful kind of base plans, but maybe the public will have a 12% deviation or above the 10%, or again, maybe not adhere to one of those other criterias. But great question, Dave, on what we will do as a firm. And I will speak with Chris and Paul and we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great to get some clarification there. My understanding from prior conversations was that, and I think there was a prior meeting where Chris indicated that the firm would in an alternative form to District R that doesn't allow for that, would digitize the map so that it as accurately as possible could be posted to the website and in the future provided at a council meeting in some digital form. Even if that didn't, comply with what you guys, would recommend in terms of, the following block groups or whatever. And then as you point out, that may be a map, one of those maps may be a map that's very close to what we think can be approved by the council, and you guys may offer some, as a firm, some slightly tweaked maps to show examples of that. But the council, to be clear, my understanding was that the council would be able to have available to them unaltered maps, digitized versions of all the maps that were submitted by the public, even those that didn't comply with block group lining.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, we do that. We will have a breakdown of all of the Districtor submitted maps and all of the paper submitted maps. For paper maps, we will hand draw them and they will all have a breakdown of the full plan. So you'll be able to see the full plan, total plan deviation, and then you'll see the breakdown by district. So what is the total population? What is the citizen voting age population? And then also that deviation. So you're correct, Dave, each of those plans will receive that treatment. And yeah, we can note and point out which ones potentially don't follow all of the laws that the city will have to utilize.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Al.
Thank you. I don't know if you were on at our last meeting, Sophia, but we brought up an example of one of the census blocks that basically goes from one neighborhood to another neighborhood and crosses the creek to do that. And they're sort of, distinct neighborhoods. And so what happens is that you have the houses on one side of the street go in the neighborhood on the other side of the creek, whereas the houses on the other side, on the other side of the street, go to the east. So one goes to the west of the creek and one goes to the east of the creek, but it's split down the middle of the street. And so, it'd be like my neighbor across the street is in a different district than me. Is that a cool thing to do? See the problem I had, I was working with one of the maps and trying to draw the districts, and to balance the populations, I had to make a line at the creek And it was all that was a census block for a lot of blocks, but one census block, you know, has this little sliver of finger that comes over. I mean, is that it? It doesn't. I don't really care. It just sort of looks funny, and people might think it's funny that their neighbor across the street from them is in a different district.
So you're saying that there was one, excuse me, census block that just had a really funny shape,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
the
yeah,
public may not understand that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think part of this, the process of redistricting is again, understanding that when we talk about census data, it's not just total population data or the percent deviation, or we can understand the citizen voting age population breakdown. It's also geography. So the census comes in kind of an education to the public about what is census geography, how does that start, and then also what is the population that we get from that geography. And it is based on that kind of hierarchy that we receive that data in. And it begins at the block level, and then it goes up to block groups. And in California, I think a lot of the public are familiar with census tracts for those who were a part of the 2020 Hard to Count outreach work that happened last year. But it is part of the process that when we talk about redistricting, we do talk about data, but we also talk about that geography. So across the state and the country, there are some blocks that look really odd. But again, we have to utilize those because the geography is tied to the data and vice versa.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, and we have, I don't know if on the presentation or the 101 presentation that we gave to your committee or the council, you know, has slides of those, but in one of the versions of our redistricting presentations, we zoom in to an area in California that shows the difference of blocks, block groups, and track. But it is a learning process for those who maybe didn't do GIS or urban planning, but those things are tied together. But it is a little confusing, and we recognize that. So we appreciate these questions and this committee and just your assistance with helping to educate the public on the process.
Okay.
Yeah, we do understand that sometimes it is a bit frustrating, but in order to adhere to that criteria, those are the
Okay.
confines that we work in. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think this will come up again.
Yeah, and we're prepared again to
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
explain
Okay,
that.
good. Okay, good. Because I was happy with how my map came out, but you know, it just looks a little funny.
And thankfully, compactness is low on the criteria, the traditional redistricting principles.
Yeah.
So equal
Yeah.
population is one,
Yeah,
and
that's good.
compactness is
Yeah.
lower. So
Yeah.
that helps.
Okay,
And just-
thanks.
And if I could, Councilmember Alarcon, Vice Mayor Clark, and you use the term sometimes in reference to state law, you know, redistricting, and obviously, Sophia, we're going through the districting
Yes,
process, not
thank you.
redistricting. And yeah, member of the public has pointed out, and we're trying to clean up our website to find where we need to be using districting, and in some, you know, rare cases referring to redistricting when it's a reference to a particular law. So just want to make that clear that we are for the public's benefit, we are in the districting process, and going forward, we'll try to be clear about that to not confuse with other redistricting that may be going on in our region.
All right, does anyone else have any questions before we move to public comment? Okay, if Brian, do we have anyone of the public who would like to speak?
We do. Mr. Ruiz. All right, Mr. Ruiz, you can talk now.
Thank you. Natalia, I have a couple of real brief follow-up questions after this first one, but I'd like to just start with this census block issue. You know, it's been kind of frustrating for me. When this first came up, I tried to do a little bit of online research myself, and I was primarily directed to the Census Bureau website, and they describe what census blocks are, but I couldn't find any information on how what the criteria is for creating them. And I think if I have that question, I gotta believe some other members of the public would like to at least know why we have these odd shaped census blocks in our little town. And, you know, along with that comment, I mean, I've played around a lot with Districtr at this point, and quite frankly, I'll admit, my last map is really close to what my hand-drawn map is. So I'm getting better at it, and I'll continue to work on it. But one of the questions I had looking at it and playing with it is, why are the census blocks in our little town so different in size? There's some of them that takes up, you know, blocks and blocks of a neighborhood. Others appear to be one city block. And I can't believe that in our town, that reflects equalized number of residents in each census block. So I haven't been able to find what the criteria is that goes into creating the size of the blocks and why in our town we have such different sizes of census blocks. And I think that should be just the basic information for those of us who are wondering why we can't just draw the boundaries where we want them. And then I have a follow-up question to that, but that's my first one. And then I just have a couple of brief comments at the end. So maybe it's unfair to ask you, maybe just take a note that, you know, some of us are interested in how this works and why we have such different size census blocks in our town. Like Alice said, you know, some areas I can, you know, put one city block where I want it. Other areas, there's, you know, huge sections of our town that you can't separate out. So if there's not an answer to that, then fine, I'll just give you the rest of my comments.
When Sophia, is that something that we can find in terms of that information?
Yeah, the Census Bureau is the one that does work to create those blocks. And you'll see some that are smaller because they have a higher population, and others that are larger have a lower population on them. But when we get the Districtr district drawing map up, you will see the total population of each block when you like hover over it. And I can do a demo on that when we get that up. But again, it's part of the law that we have to use when we're going through a districting system, and also when we are talking about redistricting. Again, it's based on census data and equal population. So when we're going through this process, that's the confines that we need to use in order to convert at large from a districted system. So again, we understand that it's a little frustrating, but that's the basis that we have to use throughout this process.
Can I infer from what you said that the census blocks are based on population?
Yes, yeah, you will in the Districtr tool, because the community of interest tool right now, you can also hover over it using that, like it's called the inspector tool. It looks like a magnifying glass. And if you hover over a census block using Districtr, it will tell you the total population of that block. And again, we are waiting on this Districtr to update the data set utilizing the statewide database so that we have the final data set that the city will have to use. But it is based on total population for that specific census block. And again, that's why we do not split them, because then we wouldn't be utilizing the true census data because that's the most granular level of data that we receive from the Bureau.
Okay. Yeah, I found that pressing on the evaluation tool, it said that the population as of 2010 was 13,000, I think 579. And I tried this a bunch of times, but when I filled up all the census blocks, the population came to 13,504. So I don't know where those other 75 people are. Anyway, it's just something I'm gonna be looking for when we get to the 2020 data.
If I can follow up, then this I'd call a suggestion to Dave to consider. As a member of the public, I would appreciate getting an opinion, or, you know, it doesn't have to be anything real formal, but have our city attorney prepared to explain this issue and why we must use census block. And if we don't want to, I mean, you can always violate the law and see what the consequences are. But if we don't want to use the census block approach perfectly, and like I said, in my last District R map, I used it 99% of the time. But if we don't, what are the consequences? Is our city attorney going to tell us we have to use the census block approach? And that's fine. If they say that, I'll shut up and not make any more comments. But I would like to hear that from our city attorney. And then I just got a couple of follow-up quick questions that were all in my long-winded, I apologize, memo. But I think it's odd that we can't delete old maps, but I wonder if the consultant has some suggestions for us, because I think I've posted either 9 or 10 maps now, and I don't like any of them except the most recent one. And so I think it'd be a waste of time and confusing if you present all of my maps, and there'll be more over the next 2 months, to the council. I mean, they're gonna go, what is all this stuff? And why does Russell like his last one? And we still have to look at all these other things. So I'm not asking for an answer right now, but I think that that's a reasonable consideration to help the process, so we don't have a bunch of maps that the people who created them don't even like anymore. And then I've asked this question, and I'm not sure what the answer was, quite frankly, but we're going to have however many maps, and I hope we get a whole lot from that mailing. That's going to be interesting. But are we going to winnow out maps received, or is everything we receive going to be placed before the council at the first council hearing? And if they are going to be winnowed out, who does that? I think I kind of heard the consultants say that they're going to do some winnowing if they determine that the hand-drawn maps don't comply with the law, but then they don't want to give us a legal opinion. So I'm not sure what to do with that. I'd asked in my long memo whether it's typical or our committee wants to make a recommendation on the map. And again, we don't need to have an answer to that today. I would strongly support having our committee recommend a map if you can agree on it. And then I was just curious if generally, typically, if the consultant has a sense of how many maps we'd actually be presenting to the council at that first hearing. Would it be 3 or 400, or, you know, exaggeration? But so those are my questions. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia, if you could answer maybe some of those questions, we can start off with the first one, or the first one, the last one kind of tie together in terms of the maps and how they would be presented to the council, and maps that are kind of on District R. For example, I also kind of jumped in and played and saved it without any thought to it. I was just trying to do the colors.
Yeah, so on that, does Dave want to jump in and say
I
something?
can, and I'll,
Okay.
when you're done, Sophia, I'll address the question about the committee making a recommendation.
Okay, perfect. So in Districtor, I think as we've noted, is that all the maps that are submitted on the site utilizing the specific City of Carpinteria Districtor site are public submissions for this process. And so we have to, we're not allowed to delete them because they are submitted under this process and are seen as public testimony, and will need to be on the City of Carpinteria website because they are things that are submitted by the public, and we don't have the right to take them down because they were official public testimony. But if a member of the public, again, would like to write in, and Mr. Rees gave great testimony today, and he could give us the specific number of the one that he would like to uplift, so members can do that. But because it is if it's submitted on that site, it is seen as public testimony, whether it's a community of interest map or a map that is utilized or submitted using the district-based tool. And so I'll let Dave answer that following question. So I hope that it gives you an answer again. So I guess just if you don't want to save it or submit it, then keep it as a draft, or you can save that URL, copy that URL, and then work on it until you want to save it. But anything that's submitted will be something that we will have to do. What I said earlier is that kind of breakdown of the data. So.
Thanks, Sophia. And the second part of that question was the winnowing down part. And my understanding, maybe you can clarify, Sophia, is that there won't be any winnowing down of the maps. All the maps that are submitted will be available to be considered by the council. If there's additional information that Mr. Ruiz or anybody else wants to submit with regard to a map that they created, to let them know that they no longer support that map or whatever, that's fine. But all the maps that are published and submitted to the city will be available for the council to review.
Absolutely. And the modification that I noted earlier will be if the board would like to uplift those as a draft map that they would like to specifically discuss at the third and fourth meeting, or consider as a final draft map. So in order to consider a final map, we would have to make sure that any public submission or map that we are asked from the council to draw, again, adheres to that, the total plan deviation, and that we're adhering to those traditional redistricting criteria. So we would only modify a map if it doesn't already adhere to one of those criteria, or if we get direction from the council to look at a particular community of interest, or look at changing the map based on testimony that was heard, or a direction from the council. So we would do that again from direction of you, and again to make sure that the final map adheres to the law.
And just to make clear on how that process will work, Sophia, my understanding is that we will not be modifying people's maps, but all the maps will be available, and then the analysis, a part of the analysis that Redistricting Partners will do will be to identify themes in maps and maps that are close, and then produce perhaps its own, independent of the pool of maps that the public has submitted, prepare a few examples of maps that follow those themes, that comply or nearly comply, and that sort of thing, to give the council an idea of some options for adopting a map. So to try to make it easier for the council to understand which maps are close and how they might ultimately prepare a map for adoption. Right. There may be a map that's perfect, and they say, here's the map that's perfect as one of the options. Map number 54 is as a consulting group, we think is important, is perfect. But I think importantly, Redistrict Partners, as I understand it, may be preparing maps independent of the pool of maps, again, that are kind of hybrids or play off of that theme, to give the council an example.
Yes, exactly. We can do that to create one, from things that we've heard, because we've had a staff member on every call, and sometimes what happens is that the council or committee will really like a plan that is being submitted by the public, and they can uplift that, and then we can, again, the modifications would be minimal, but we would use the base of a public plan, and then we could make changes to make sure that it adheres to the law. And we can also additionally make ones that comes from Redistricting Partners staff based on direction from the city. So there's a couple of different ways to get draft maps that you all can discuss, but definitely, Dave.
Thanks. And then to get to the committee's role, I think Olivia has the resolution that she can screen share that established the committee's role. The committee was put together by the council with the purpose of helping staff work to establish the process, right? We feel that that's pretty much done, that work. You've done a great job, created the process and kind of launched this thing. And we think we're pretty close to winding up the work of the committee. The committee's role is not to recommend particular maps to the city council, so it wasn't asked to do that. Does that preclude the committee from doing that? No. But wasn't what the council asked for the committee to do. So we think maybe one more meeting of the committee. As your committee indicated, you'd like that to be this first meeting to talk about, district mapping process and the outcomes of the communities of interest. And we will do that and then, take your direction from there. But we think that could be, if you desire, that could be the last of the committee meetings, because from that point forward, we'll be having council meetings. I think there's some value in handing it off to the council and having a clean break versus running parallel processes that could get confusing once the matter goes before the council. Thanks, Olivia.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Okay. So should we, I believe the next item is to set up our next meeting date. You had mentioned sometime in October, Dave? Do you have a date?
Yeah, we'll circulate a date once we work on. I don't know, Olivia, if you had any dates in mind.
I don't have dates in mind, but I think maybe if we do like 2 weeks, I think our options are probably either like 2 weeks or the standing fourth Wednesday of the month. But maybe in 2 weeks, so that's kind of concurrent with the final update on the mailing of the maps, etc.
Okay.
If that works for the committee members,
Yeah, that works for me.
like
So what-
October
so what-
13th.
What day is that?
October 13th.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mhm.
Okay.
At 4?
Yeah, I think at 4 to be consistent with our meeting.
I actually have the South Coast Youth Safety
Oh, sorry.
Partnership until 5 on the 13th.
Okay.
We could do it earlier in the day. And do 1:30 or something like that,
I can't.
but no, okay.
Mm-mm.
We could pick another day of the week or another week. Want to look out at the 20th?
Yeah, the 20th I'm free either from 8 to 12 or after 3 o'clock.
About 4 o'clock on the 20th.
That works for me. How about you, Al? Okay, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. We will adjourn our meeting for today.
Well, Natalia,
Yeah,
before we adjourn on this last item, I notice that our attendee has his hand up to
Oh,
comment.
okay.
Do you want to take comment on that last item?
Yes, absolutely.
Wanted to follow up with Sophia on this issue of trying to delete our maps that we don't like anymore. I think I heard you say that if the author of the map informs you in writing that we want it deleted, that maybe you can do something about that. But I'm not clear. You kind of made it at the end of that comment. You made it sound like you can't delete her, but I don't know. It seems to make sense that if I want you to eliminate maps because I think it'd be clear for the rest of the public and the council to know what I'm thinking, that would be a good thing. And I'm happy to write whoever and say, I am the author of these maps and I would like all of them deleted except my most current one. Is that possible?
So what I said was that if you would like to write in or verbalize a particular ID of the map or name of the map and submit that to the committee or the council, that could be additional testimony, but we will not be deleting any maps. So we will still be doing the data breakdown of all of the maps submitted. But if a member who submitted multiple maps would like to uplift one of the maps that they have submitted, then they can do so. So,
So I'll just tell you what I'm gonna do with that input is when at the council meeting, I guess the first council meeting, I will identify every map by ID number that I've created and say, I don't like any of these. I was experimenting. I'm not tech savvy. And here's the one that I like today. So that's what I'll do.
absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great. And it should give you the ID and the name,
Yeah,
if you
I've
gave
seen
the
it.
name on the map. Perfect. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just so I have on our calendar, what was the date and time of the next meeting, so I can ensure that one of us are on?
October 20th at 4 p.m.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job.
Hi, everybody.